For the first 3 centuries of its existence, Christianity was poor. Not symbolically poor, actually poor. Its followers met in homes, catacombs, in hidden corners of cities. There were no grand buildings, no vaults of gold, no armies. Christians were persecuted, excluded from power, and often executed. Faith was a liability, not an advantage. Then, everything changed. In the year 313 CE, Roman Emperor Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, legalizing Christianity across the empire. With a single signature, a hunted religion became legitimate, and legitimacy opened the door to wealth. Once Christianity gained imperial approval, donations followed. Roman elites gifted land, nobles left estates to the church in their wills. Emperors granted tax exemptions and legal privileges. The message was unmistakable. Holiness and power were no longer opposites. Constantine himself financed the original St. Peter's Basilica, setting a precedent that would echo for centuries. Sacred space was no longer humble, it was monumental. From this moment forward, the Church learned a rule every empire understands. Belief inspires loyalty, but money sustains authority. The Church learns to tax faith. As the Roman world collapsed, the Church survived, and in the chaos of the early Middle Ages, it did more than survive, it accumulated. Its most effective financial tool was simple and devastatingly reliable: the tithe. Across Europe, believers were expected to give 1/10 of their production to the Church. Grain, livestock, wine, it all flowed upward from villages to bishops and monasteries. Refusal was not merely disobedience, it was framed as a threat to one's soul. This was not charity, this was a religious tax system. Over generations, those tithes transformed into land ownership. By the turn of the first millennium, the Catholic Church had become the largest landholder in Western Europe. Fields, forests, mills, vineyards, assets that produced wealth year after year. Long before modern capitalism, the Church had mastered passive income. Yet land and tithes were only the beginning. Selling time off in the afterlife. By the late medieval period, the Church introduced one of the most controversial financial practices in history: indulgences. The idea was theological on the surface, but economic at its core. Through payments or donations, believers could reduce punishment for sins, for themselves or deceased relatives. Fear became currency, guilt became leverage. Indulgences funded churches, monasteries, and military campaigns. They also fueled resentment. While priests preached humility, the church's coffers swelled. Faith was no longer just spiritual, it was transactional. Holy wars, profitable outcomes. When the Crusades began in 996, they were framed as divine missions, but they were also massive financial operations. Armies require funding. The Church imposed special levies, offered indulgences in exchange for cash, and benefited directly from conquered lands and seized treasures. Victory brought both souls and assets. By the end of the Crusades, the papacy rivaled kings in power. It taxed, negotiated, financed wars, and controlled territory. The spiritual institution had become a geopolitical force. And like all empires, it required constant revenue to sustain itself. Renaissance popes and royal lifestyles. By the Renaissance, the transformation was complete. Popes were no longer distant shepherds of souls, they were rulers, diplomats, and patrons of culture. The Vatican became a center of wealth, politics, and influence. The decaying medieval basilica in Rome was no longer sufficient. The papacy envisioned something greater, a structure that would dominate the Christian world. Rebuilding St. Peter's Basilica required unimaginable sums. To raise the money, indulgences returned with renewed intensity. One preacher famously claimed that the moment a coin rang in the offering box, a soul escaped punishment. The pitch worked. Gold flowed to Rome. Meanwhile, papal courts lived lavishly. Banquets, art commissions, palaces, all justified as glorifying God, all funded by ordinary believers. Behind the scenes, the Vatican also embraced banking. Though lending at interest was publicly condemned, popes quietly partnered with powerful Italian banking families. The Church became deeply embedded in Europe's financial networks. Monarchs owed money, bankers sought favor. Rome stood at the center. The protest that shattered the system. In 1517, a German monk named Martin Luther challenged the entire structure. His criticism was not merely theological, it was economic. He argued that salvation could not be purchased, that indulgences exploited the poor, and that Rome had turned faith into a marketplace. His protest ignited the Protestant Reformation. Europe fractured. Entire nations rejected papal authority. Lands, tithes, and revenue streams vanished. The Church retained immense wealth, but its monopoly was broken. The very mechanism that funded its greatest monument had triggered its greatest loss. Losing land, finding new money. For centuries, the Vatican's power rested on territory. That ended in 1870 when the Papal States were absorbed into the newly unified Italian nation. The Pope lost land, armies, and direct political rule. Many believed the Church's financial dominance was over. They were wrong. In 1929, the Vatican secured its comeback through the Lateran Treaty, negotiated with Mussolini. Italy recognized Vatican City as a sovereign state and compensated the Church with vast sums of cash and government bonds. The payout was enormous, enough to rebuild the Vatican's financial foundations from scratch. With this capital, the Church created the Institute for Religious Works, commonly known as the Vatican Bank. Secrecy, scandals, and survival. Unlike traditional banks, the Vatican Bank operated behind walls of secrecy. It answered to no external authority. During the Cold War, its funds supported anti-communist efforts. In the late 1970s, it became entangled in one of Europe's largest financial scandals involving Banco Ambrosiano. Billions disappeared. A banker was found dead under a London bridge. Allegations connected the Vatican to organized crime and intelligence agencies. Yet the institution endured. Reforms came slowly. Transparency remained limited. The Vatican was criticized, but never dismantled. Wealth that cannot be measured. Today, the Vatican's true wealth is unknown. Its art collections alone, from the Sistine Chapel to Renaissance frescoes, are priceless and unsellable. Its investments are layered through foundations and institutions. Its real estate spans continents. Official budgets suggest modest operations. History suggests otherwise. Because wealth built over centuries does not disappear, it adapts. The real lesson. This story is not about belief. It is about systems. The Vatican did not become wealthy by accident. Its fortune was assembled through land, taxes, fear, alliances, secrecy, and financial innovation, the same tools used by empires, governments, and corporations. Faith provided legitimacy, money provided power. And that pattern is not unique to religion. Any institution that asks for trust while shielding its finances deserves scrutiny. History teaches us that virtue is often the mask worn by authority, and belief is one of the most profitable resources ever discovered. Understand the machinery, and the illusion loses its grip. Ignore it, and history will repeat, not as myth, but as control.